afternoon, everybody. So let's try again. They usually say that the post-lunch session is the graveyard session. But of course, with the students here, we have no intention to turn into that. So let's try again. Good afternoon to you all. And thanks for the introduction, Phil. And let me just echo a few sentiments expressed by Phil. I mean, I do find it curious sometimes when we discuss and debate university transformation, how we sometimes treat students almost as an afterthought, forgetting that there can hardly be a university without students. So I really think it's appropriate that we've decided to bring the students back into the debate, and I think it's high time that we do so. So let me just say something about what makes this afternoon's session so special, apart from the fact that we're going to have hopefully an interesting dialogue amongst the students and with the students. It's also that I think it's the only BRICS panel we have at the meeting. So literally we have representatives in one way or another from BRICS. One of my colleagues at the University of the Witwatersrand, Patrick Bond, who writes a lot about BRICS, has this interesting typology where he distinguishes between BRICS from above, in other words, elites, governments, and I suspect the corporate sector, as they seek to craft this new constellation in world affairs. Then it distinguishes between BRICS in the middle, and then thirdly, BRICS from below, people's initiatives, people's organizations, civil society. And what BRICS in the middle would suggest is the prospects to bring these two worlds together to forge partnerships. So I'm glad that we have a BRICS from below to talk to university executives and all those of us interested in it. And I've got 5 excellent presenters and speakers today, and let me introduce them in BRICS order. First, from Brazil is Vitor Ribeiro from the Federal University Rio Grande do Sul in Porto Alegre in Brazil. Vitor, welcome. A round of applause for Vitor. Secondly, Yaroslav Gulabev from ITMO University in St. Petersburg in Russia. Welcome to you. Then we have Nuper Patel, currently at the University of Johannesburg, but originally from India, and of course, South Africa is very glad that we could have a BRICS member having won over to UJ. Welcome to you, Nupur. I'll tell you now what makes her special apart from the fact that she's the only lady. And let me tell you, she's gonna get 4 times the amount of time to speak because she is the only woman on the panel. And then joining us from China, Keiyang from the Normal University in Beijing. Welcome to you, Keiyang. And then from South Africa and the University of Johannesburg, Tshepo Molloy. So you've got 2 doctoral candidates sitting on both sides of the wing, if you like. We've got 2 third-year students, and we've got a second-year student, so a nice mix. Of course, we've given them a very easy topic to discuss. What do students want from the 21st century? Right, what do they want? Suppose we could turn it around. What could students offer to make 21st century education, tertiary education, more successful? So without further ado, we've agreed on some house rules. Each speaker will speak for 3 minutes, just some introductory comments, turning the topic into their own hypothesis, own question they'd like to answer. And I'm going to ask Vitor Ribeiro to kick us off. Vitor, over to you, and welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's working.
Thank you very much, Professor Landsberg. I think it's a great opportunity to enjoy this event, this seminar. I thank to the Time Higher Education for this opportunity. Thank you for all for being present. So what I would like to say that since I am a PhD candidate in sociology, So I speak from this perspective. The building of sociological knowledge, we rely on the reality, empirical reality. So we have to guarantee that we have this proximity to the society, to the way things, people act, people behave. That's why I think for us to engage in this knowledge, building knowledge on the BRICS, the most important thing that I would say is that institutions should engage material resources in order to provide the means for the students to build capacities, to learn each other's language. Because in human sciences in general, we rely on concepts. So who can we ever get an idea of that same concept, what it means in India, what it means philosophically speaking, socially speaking in China. I think it's not enough to just rely on English as a common translator. And in order to make my point, I would like to ask a little help from my Chinese friend and tell him 我是小学生的时候，中学生的时候。我们在巴西觉得说英语是一个很特别的特性，然后呢，现在说英语是一个很基本的要求，要找工作需要说英语。Chinese is the same. What I've just said is that if you do in Brazil, when I was a child, when I was in elementary school, middle school, we considered English as a differential. You needed to learn English. So nowadays, even in Brazil, but it's a global reality, if you don't speak English, you're just out of the game. It's a basic demand. If you want to look for a job, you have to speak English. That's the feeling that I have. We need to learn Hindi, we need to learn Russian, we need to learn Chinese. Of course, it's not up to one person to speak all the languages, but we need to have institutions to engage material resources in order to make students to build this capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you've just saved us 18 seconds. And it was good that you actually display your Mandarin. You did in the meeting as well yesterday. So you're living BRICS. But thank you for that introductory comment. So we're going to go in BRICS order. And without further ado, Yaroslav, welcome again. And over to you for your 3 minutes introductory statement.
Thank you very much to everyone. I am glad to be here. Thanks for Times Higher Education. Thanks for Professor Landsberg and for my colleagues. In Russia, I'm afraid we are a bit more technical, we're a bit more precise. So when I was preparing for this, I came to think about much more exact things that I would like to see from a 21st century education. And there are a lot of problems in BRICS countries, there are a lot of problems in emerging economies, and all of them can be resoluted, but the most important, I believe, is academic mobility. Academic mobility is buried in bureaucracy. Everyone knows this. It is a problem in Russia, as it always was, but I'm pretty sure everyone can see and understand what I'm talking about, that it's pretty obvious that we need a clear system for academic mobility. Everyone who ever tried to do something like that always finds himself hitting some walls, like it's always something. And as a BRICS unit, we surely can take up this task, and we can resolve it. Another thing that's been problematic in Russia, and once again, I believe in some other places, is the quality of education. After all, universities are mostly about education. This is one of the two pillars of universities. And the standards of education are such that there is like an old school education, a new school liberal education, but when they hit each other, there are always problems, there are always troubles. Like as students, we can see that it's on the student level, but everyone knows this. And what we need for this is higher standards of education. Another problem that all of us are facing is the recognition of diplomas. It is a Russian problem very much, because technically we did sign some agreements and our diplomas are technically acceptable in the world, but in reality sometimes the diplomas from some such countries as Russia and other BRICS countries are looked down upon. Everyone can see this. We can do as high on rating as we want, but there's always going to be this problem. And another important problem which my colleague from China, Niang, will elaborate on is the need for student self-organizing. It is very important nowadays that, as Professor Landsberg said, the voice of students is not heard. Like, you hear it now, but it's often mistook. And the presence of students in different committees, presence of students in different governing parts of university is very important. Thank you very much for your attention. Landsberg.
Thank you. You've got 12 seconds left. So let me use that 12 seconds by asking you, so what is it that BRICS, you believe, can do to help with mobility, for example? So
I believe that there are several examples of such programs in the world when we, you talked about BRICS from below and BRICS from above. Like, BRICS from above can form infrastructure that BRICS from below can use that would save us from all of this bureaucracy, visa issues, like academic issues. It's all resolvable.
Fantastic. Thank you for that and an excellent input. And now, Nupur Patel, if you want to use 12 minutes, as I promised you, it's up to you. But your 3 minutes will start now.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me today. It's a great privilege being here, part of this team. I'd just like to start off with something that I read earlier this year in the book called Transcendence, written by APJ Abdul Kalam. He says that he had a vision for 2020, right, for India. He says, we have identified five important areas to transform India: education and health, agriculture, information and communication, infrastructure, and critical technology. I feel two main important parts of this is education and information and communication. Education being key to success, to uplifting the country on its own, and information and communication, how you do that is by communicating, by getting to know one another, getting to the core of why we do things, who we do it for, right? These are the two main important areas of, sorry, I get so nervous speaking.
You know you're doing fine.
So yeah, another thing that is major is gender equality. I feel women are not given enough opportunity. Also, sometimes we feel we're not good enough to be out there, and therefore we allow other people or the opposite sex to put us down. And I feel it's a time now to come out of that. Another thing is a lot of unemployment is due to, so once a person comes out of university, they have a degree. And perhaps maybe when they want to go out of the country, they feel that the standard of what they've learned is not equivalent to the employment contract that they've just signed. And that is a major, I feel a negative point in having a good education and not applying that. So these are my main points. I apologize for the stuttering.
No, you're doing okay.
And by the
way, on the gender issue, I mean, I really think this equilibrium you see here, in future we should do better to be a bit more focused on gender. No, I didn't mean to get an applause, but thanks for that anyway. So Kayang, Yang, and Vitor decided to form something of a bilateral within BRICS. He trusts, Kayang trusts Vitor's Mandarin so much, he's decided, in case I get stuck with English, I need a translator. So we've unscrambled it a bit. Over to you, Kayang Yang from Beijing University.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to Times Higher Education, thanks to Professor Landsberg, and it's a great honor for me to sit in here to share some opinions with you. And as a student, I want to say that maybe the three main things we need from 21st century education is globalization vision, and innovation talents, and what most important is social responsibility. And to give students those talents, I think universities should be inclusive and sustainable. Inclusive means cultural exchanges. Maybe universities of BRICS countries should provide more research cooperations and international exchanges opportunity for students. It can give students globalization vision, and even they can set up joint labs. So it can help students to develop their innovation talents. And about social responsibility, that needs universities to be sustainable. Sustainable, in my opinion, means not mean environment. I mean it's for the long-term development. Universities should advocate for balanced and sustainable developments so as to achieve the unity of economic and environment development. And students, through the process, students can develop their social responsibility, and when they graduate, they can go back and service for their university, service for the society, and service for the world. And that's what I talk about. Thank you.
Thanks for that very crisp and succinct input. Mr. Translator, you were not quite needed yet. Okay, thanks for that. And last but by no means least, in terms of introductory comments, Tshepo Moloi from UJ.
Enkosi kakhulu. Ke Tshepo Moloi, le kgolokwe. Ke hlaba kgogo ka lemao ke se ko moreneng ke re morena ke ye ke tlhabile. I greet you in this way because interestingly, the VC yesterday, in passing, makes reference to our African humanism in his greeting to the House when he made his reference to Sanibonani. Sanibona meaning we see you, however we see you in the plural, not in the individual, because this is a signature of how we in this side of the world, as part of the Global South family, would like to perceive ourselves in our humanity. Now, coming back to the theme, reimagining a future university, what is our thoughts around this? So I'm doing a doctoral project on one of our sages here called Iskiya Mphahlele, who traversed the world and spent 2 decades in exile. And he is basically a phenomenal mind on this theme. So I found it fit to quote him just so that I could give context to my frame of thought. Of course, I take it from Simpiwe Sisanti, who quotes Mphahlele, and this is when Mphahlele is addressing an audience of students at the University of Transkei. I tell them something about African humanism. I suggest how if our education system is based on this philosophy, it will truly express our independence of mind, a decolonized mind. I sketch out a plan whereby we should get to know ourselves, our continent, through a study of African history, religion, cosmology, literature, and the arts. I try as best as I can to explain that we can still find our way to the ancestors, who are a vital part of our humanism. That this is a state of mind, which is why it can work both in the urban areas and in the rural areas. The traditional institutions no longer exist in the context in which they should be serving the respective constituencies within this part of the globe, at least the university as it stands currently. But we should not regard culture as a museum artifact. It should continue to absorb and redefine, particularly in this age of technological innovation, to inform our new political systems, which we must master if we are to participate effectively in international business and politics. I continue to drive home the point that right from primary school, we need to devise projects that will send pupils into the community to discover who they are. In other words, they need to know who their heroes are as well, outside of the textbooks which are written and outdated pre-colonialization. Of course, as I go into Mpahlela's, as I move away from Mpahlela, I go to his counterpart, Ngungi wa Thiong'o, who writes in 1981 in his book, Writers in Politics, under the title of The Place of Teaching in African Literature. And here we find Ngungi explaining to the audience that I hope the very title will provoke our anger. Post Uhuru wa Bendera, we're yet to debate the place of African literature in our education system. A Russian child grows under the influence of his native literature. So, you know, I'm coming back to BRICS. A Chinese, Frenchman, or English first is taught their own national literature before they're taught the literature beyond their borders. So, in Africa, this is the direct opposite. We get taught more about Shakespeare and all of these worldly icons from beyond South Africa, and only in our matric syllabuses are we going to get a snapshot, you know, of our own African and political history. This is problematic. So, Ngungi assists us then when he says that Jane Austen is deemed more relevant in Kenya than Chinua Achebe. And of course, you know, this morning you were being addressed by Professor Wole Soyinka, who I think I got calls when he was addressing that, is that Wally Sirote? Is that, I mean, Wole Soyinka is not known by people who I would have assumed you would have known him.
So Tshepo, I just want to say you're now into your second 3 minutes, but
Right.
I'd like you to round up
Okay,
so that we can just get the debate going.
Yeah. So that we get into the debate. Basically, in a nutshell, from what I was quoting earlier on, the future African university, at least from the context of the South, the global South, we would like to see precisely what I was quoting on what Mpahlela was trying to emphasize. We want a curriculum that our students are going to find that is going to teach on African culture, on African history, on African cosmology, on African religion. And we, in saying this,
Sure.
we are not in any way saying that we are dismissing what is currently so-called Western-centric or Eurocentric education. We are saying we need a healthy balance of both so that we can at least be relevant locally and also be aware globally.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry that I have to stop with a round of applause for Tshepo, please. Sorry that I interrupted you there, Tshepo. I mean, I just want us to stick to the rules of the game we all agreed. And if I may, let me just pick up on where Tshepo left off, because as we had our fascinating preparation meeting yesterday, I'd like to share with the audience what was so fascinating is that, without putting words in their mouths, our Russian and Chinese students felt that there was probably too much local in their education system and not enough exposure to the international. From the South African perspective, clearly with the emphasis on decolonization, we need more endogeneity. And the Brazilian students also said, even in their case, maybe too much of the foreign and not enough of the local. So let's play on that theme for the sake of our audience. Just share with us, from your own perspective, what can a BRICS constellation do? Do you need more localization, more globalization, a balance? Vitor, you start.
Thank you. From our South American perspective, the production of knowledge in sociology, for example, is very internationalized. We read the French, we read the Americans, we even get to, I don't speak German, but we read the Germans. In that sense, and we have a very strong local production and theorization also. But somehow there is this, it's invisible what happens in India, It's invisible what happens in Russia, and it's invisible what happens in South Africa. It's invisible what happens in China. So it comes a time that in our institutions, if we are to talk about BRICS from below, we need to create the means to engage in that quest for learning each other's culture, each other's literature, each other's cosmology, and that is a tough question. It's a tough quest. It's not easy, but I think it's really necessary.
Thanks for that. Kayeng, you also, spoke very strongly about, the need for more. In fact, you even expressed the need for globalization and for students to even develop their own conceptualizations around globalization. Just talk us through that, please.
Okay. Actually, in China, most of the students have the globalization version I mentioned just now. At least in the university, in the 2017 ranked top 10. There are many Chinese universities, and at least I know that in those universities, students have many opportunities to exchange and to see the world. For example, in my university, Beijing Normal University, we have a international cultural exchange program called Looking China. We invite students all over the world to come to China and use their camera to record the true China, and when they go back, they will share what they have seen to their family, their friends, and this is the process for cultural exchange. And what I want to say is, in BRICS countries, we need more exchanges like that, and besides that, we need more cooperations, not just exchange. We need cooperation to maybe research or something like that. Just because when we stay together to do something, it will. When we get together to do something, and we can see our cultures different and understand each other's culture. So I think the cooperation is more important.
Thanks, excellent point. Yaroslav, you actually linked your concern about the inward-looking nature of Russian education directly to your concern about the quality of education and the recognition of Russian education by the outside world. Just talk us through that concern, please.
Yeah, firstly I would like to say that I think that I know that we elaborate on this point very much. The fact that China and Russia, for example, are a bit inward, whilst South Africa is a bit outward. And but it's so important that we are BRICS, we are united, we are all together, but we are so different. And this is key that we are all trying to, in one way or another, to say. But yeah, Russia is a surprisingly young country that some people forget, that it's only like 25 years old. And that means that there is a lot of clash between ideologies. Like, I'm a third-year student, I have professors. I have old professors, I have Soviet professors. We don't like to say Soviet because it's not about that. It's not about Soviet Union, it's not about politics. It's about old school teaching methods. The ones that we, as a students, likes to call lecturer with his back to the audience, right? And then there are young liberal. Yeah, but it's funny, but it is a problem, right? And there are young liberal teachers who engage us, who sit us in the circles, and they sometimes overdo that too, and it becomes too playful. And we all know the struggle in finding balance, like it's obvious, right? But where does the balance come from? The answer sounds very banal. It sounds very obvious and very, I don't know, book-like, but it is in cooperation. Just because, I love my university, and what I've seen from Russian education is great, but I've also heard some concerns I've also heard concerns about provinces, about faraway places where there are no conflicts like I've just described to you. All the teachers are old school teachers, and it's terrible. And I mean, no, these teachers are great. They have fantastic research records. They have, they're great teachers, but they can't engage students to listen to them, and that's a problem. And you're right. The quality obviously suffers. Our diplomas are obviously not going to be recognized well because of this, because some people in Europe or USA will think, well, those guys don't teach like we like to. And that's the big point generally, that I think it's very nice to talk about this, just to sit and talk about this a bit, about how, what Nupur said, I'm having trouble, so what Nupur said about the fact that our cultures should, intercede a bit, it is, just listen to it and you'll understand how important that is. Thank you.
Thanks. And by the way, that that sounded like the makings of an excellent essay. The title, The Clash of Ideologies. I really like that. Nupur, a perspective from you?
I do feel that, on a personal note, being from India, I see a lot of international students coming into India for only two specific fields, for medicine and for engineering, because that is major in India, right? But I feel that not a lot of students from India move outwards, or when they do after getting a degree, they don't feel that it's satisfactory, the employment that they seek. And I feel that's a major problem. Another thing is culturally, I'm very cultured, and I'm from India, and I feel I'm very rooted to where I'm from, even though I live in a different country. And I feel, and that by no means means that I'm not, I'm not accepting of somebody else's culture. I want to learn more. I want to know how does a specific tradition work, ritual, etc., of a different culture. And I feel it's very important for us to mingle and find a common ground, because basically all our subjects are the same. Everything is the same. Our common ground is humaneness, right? And if we don't work on that, then that's why I think that's probably the reason why we face so much of racism in the country, so many prejudices and all of that. It all arises from not being able to accommodate another person. And I think that just comes from understanding where the other person comes from.
You've got a very good sense of humor, by the way. If that's your definition of nervousness, then I don't want to see a nervous person. It was excellent.
You have not seen my hand.
Yeah, no, you're clearly pulling our leg. So Tshepo, I took off from where you left off. So just in very crisp fashion, please, just share with our participants your conceptualization of decolonization from a student perspective and your own perspective, because it's clearly squarely on the agenda in South Africa, but from your perspective.
Thank you very much. I think I just want to return to, you made reference to Patrick Bond. Just for the benefit of the audience, this is our local guru on BRICS. He does a lot of research around BRICS, and the model that Professor Landsberg was referring to earlier of BRICS of the above and BRICS of below basically has a middle where it meets and it converges. And basically this is a BRICS that he would like, or he argues, needs to basically move away from the corridors of power, if you like. So this is, as we know it now, BRICS exists amongst the Memorandum of Understanding of the of the 5 partners in the conversation. But we need to now get to the BRICS of not monologues amongst these in power, but into dialogues where we can actually have, beyond the corridors of government, what you would like to refer to as people-to-people engagement. So this, of course, this panel, for example, is a typical example of this, that in their lovely and elite and white elephant, if you like, symposia, they should have student voices coming out, and we hear, amongst that interaction, what happens. For example, yesterday, as a host, I decided to succumb to the request of my colleagues here. They said they don't want to be stuck in a hotel, so they wanted to see South Africa. So I decided, okay, we took a little drive, and we went into Alexandra Township. Very interesting, our conversation, and I did say that I would love for them to also just share with the audience what stood out for them. But it's a pity we didn't go with our colleague here. She had an unfortunate incident, and we also didn't go with Kiang because he was a bit jet lagged. So we went with Araslav and Vito. So when Vito and myself were speaking, Vito, Brazil, Tshepo from South Africa, about the slums, the ghetto, Araslav he was not on our same wavelength. I mean, he was saying everything that a typical middle-class, white, Eurocentric mind would manifest. But fortunately, because it was such a comfortable and close dialogue, throughout the journey in the car, we were able to speak him through the tensions. I mean, we went from identity to economy. I mean, the whole idea of colored people and the Creole, and how that version in Brazil is now becoming a problematic concept, depending who says it, to Negre, which they also refer to as well. But, and of course, in America would be nigger and all of that. But the point here is, if we move and we take seriously Patrick Bond's argument of we need for BRICS to take itself seriously, more of these kind of interactions at student level, beyond government and the official corridors, then I think we will begin to have some form of progress that we can talk to post such tensions. I don't know if I've taken too much time because
well, I mean, let me not say too much, but I think you've eaten up your time. Let me rather say that.
Okay.
But an important insight, and we'll return to some of these things. So let's make it a bit interactive. I mean, I really think our students are doing exceptionally well by touching on some very salient issues, and we should bring them more into the debate. So, some questions, some comments, responses for our students. I see one hand. No. Oh, sorry, that was terrible. One, full, year, two. Let me take a few, please. More. Okay, so at least two. So, is that Yasha? Okay, sorry, I really can't see. The glasses are not for looks.
My name is Katu, and I'm a student activist, and I'm a librarian, and I'm an entrepreneur, but most importantly, I'm a student. I want the panel perhaps to explore this concept of quality education, since South Africa is under siege with regards to people determining what type of quality education we have in South Africa. Others will tell you that we are ranked the last, and etc. But there are certain dynamics that are not looked at. For instance, how we give attention to the little ones as they come out of the primary system into the secondary system, preparing them for tertiary institutions. What should we do differently? And the other colleagues perhaps from other countries can share as to how do you give attention to the young ones as they start from early childhood, from primary, secondary to going into institutions. And the last one, very quick, it's about the issue of artificial intelligence. How do you think that will affect how we see education going forward?
Excellent point. So the quality of education, how do you see it? And you prepare youngsters for tertiary life, and artificial education and IT and how that impacts on education. Phil, microphone here, and I see a colleague here as well, just behind Phil.
Thank you. Just being slightly mischievous and putting you on the spot, but to take advantage of the fact we have several university presidents here, could I just ask the panel to sort of give us your single biggest gripe about being a student?
A single biggest what?
Your
single biggest
gripe.
frustration, concern, gripe of being a student in the early 21st century. Thanks.
So Phil is stirring the with university presidents and vice chancellors here, what is your single biggest issue that you would like to put on their agenda immediately?
My question is the BRICS from the middle, the people-to-people dialogue that students can develop. Don't you see that as a good enough way to solve the problems of human animosity and acceptance of diversity, and finally a way to heal the world? This is one thing, and the other thing that I had a little chance of going through is the cultural aspects and the philosophy of the Ubuntu, and how that could be very relevant for regenerative learning, a question that I raised in the earlier session.
Thank you. Two excellent interventions. Okay, I'm going to take... man, the acoustics is not good.
Thanks. My question, my name is Michael Cross from UJ. My question is about a comment I made in Latin America some time ago. And I was saying that, you know, one of the issues facing students is the need for critical scholarship. Now, in terms of the students, what you want for the 21st century, do you think that critical scholarship would be something that would play a role among students? If no, why? If yes, how would we achieve that?
Excellent. And let me take one last intervention for now. One last question for now. Okay. Right at the back. Right at the back, please.
Scholarship.
Keeping an eye on the time.
Hello. What I'd like to talk about is the fact that when I first came to varsity, I've never had a situation where I was using a mic. When I first came to varsity, I knew that varsity was a place of diversity, especially regarding to language. And when I first came here, I thought I'll be able to learn other languages, and I went to the library looking for some books like language. For starters, I chose my home language, Tshivenda, because I've been out of high school for quite a while, and I wanted to brush on my Tshivenda because I was listening to the radio, and the language that they speak is very clean. So when I got there, the books were very depressing. The library is very depressing. There's nothing relative to language that you can find. It's English and the general books for studying. And I feel like as a person, for example, you're coming from Russia, Brazil, and India, you would like to, when you get here, want to learn a specific language, maybe Zulu, Xhosa, Venda, Tsonga. And it should be easy for you when you get here, and you can just find all those books here, because South Africa is a country of 11 official languages, but the library has nothing there.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I'm going to start with Mr. Malloy. Tshepo, I'm going to ask you to be crisp, please. Oof.
Okay, so this is difficult for me, eh?
Try very hard.
Harsha, I didn't get that second point. It was quality education, and the second one was? Just quickly.
Artificial
intelligence.
Artificial intelligence.
Okay, great. So let me begin with Harsha's questions. So of course, you, if you are not from this side of the world and you're not following the news, you would have been, you would have missed that 2015 October marks a reviving of the 76 movement of students, you know, with the movement called Fees Must Fall. So while it makes reference to money and all that, but it actually has pregnant number of issues that came out in the discourse. And one of them, of course, was a free, decolonized, quality education. And so, so I think as you asked this question, I think it's in this context, to my understanding. For me, you know, I find it very problematic that people have jumped into the bandwagon for their own miscellaneous and irrelevant and trivial reasons. I think that what the most beautifulest thing about the uncomfortability of having that conversation was that we were now finding ourselves actually reminding the elders who in 1996 through Kada Asma actually compelled the VCs of the institutions in South Africa to actually begin to think about decolonizing a university curriculum. So we need basically to go back and renew and take those conversations very seriously, all right? And now it's a lot. I mean, I'm limited for time. But
everybody is.
Yeah, to Phil, the greatest frustration as a PhD student who decided to do all my qualifications in South Africa, it's a decision I took intentionally. I found myself becoming more and more, I started leaning towards the so-called moralistic arguments of the elders. So I was very agitated with the fact that I only learned about the Ski and Pahlela in my master's. I mean, this is ridiculous.
So what is the gripe that you have then with the elders?
The elders are so good in assisting us to soften down and calm down such that we begin to renew this position when we are met with the next generation who are asking us about the frustration that we had as well before we confronted them. Okay. So for me, that's where, so you know, we like chameleons, if you like, right? So we wanted for a long time to see black VCs take up positions in universities. And when we see them today, they're their own enemies with what they were fighting yesterday. So I think we're going to have these tensions, though. I don't think this is by any means saying that, you know, they could have done something differently given the tension that they have to negotiate in the spaces which they find themselves in these institutional
Thank you,
spaces.
Tshepo.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nupur?
Okay, I do feel, to full, my main concern is exams on a very practical basis.
Your main concerns are exams?
Exams,
okay.
Yeah. Every year, we get 2 major exams. And I feel that a lot of it should be practical because if we don't use it, what is theory if we can't, you know, take it outside into the world? I feel that what we write down is not what we do. We might write down about being kind or whatever, but we don't go out and practically do that. You know, a very small percentage of what we do theoretically, we don't actually do outside. And I feel the science, I don't know much about this because I'm an English, you know, major, but I feel that a lot of, obviously because science is increasing so vastly in finding new cures, etc., etc. They have to be practical. But why does that limit us as non-science students to, you know, not go out and do the same what we study? Another thing is, I think his question was in artificial intelligence. It's the same thing. I feel that if we roboticized everything, then what is the point of that? What is the point of you know, understanding you, understanding, I feel like I go back to the same point, but it is that.
Sure.
And how do I understand you, you know, without understanding a robot maybe next to me, who can do everything, but cannot feel what humans are meant to feel, are meant to make an impact. And I feel
Sure.
2 major points, yeah.
Thanks for your intervention. Yaroslav.
I'm going to be even more fast considering everything, but I'm going to cheat a little bit. I think we can answer all the questions, so everyone will answer what stuck to them. What stuck to me was the question about what do I find most frustrating. Is we always forget that university is about education. We sit here and find ourselves talking and swirling around. We forget that it's all about education and all the problems are in education. And the biggest problem for me is how slow research crawls into education. In Russia, it is a problem. You go to physics, you do some practical work, and you see all 70s machines, 70s the devices. And it's not just about technical, not having enough money for technical renovations. It's much more about the idea of how slowly everything crawls into another. And the second point I want to make is not an answer to the question, but I think it somehow relates to Ubuntu. I don't speak African languages. I do not know the exact concept, but I know something about it. Here's the thing. And all these conferences, they always appeal to your mind, but I will try to appeal to your heart. I'm not just a student. I also work a little bit part-time as a foreign students manager in a university, and we have troubles. I'm not going to tell exact nations, but in our dormitories there was big trouble. There were big troubles. One nation tried to kick out another one, and there were big troubles. And they came to us. We are foreign students office. We make certificates that we help with visas. We don't help with fighting of students usually, but they came to us because we have to deal with this. And I remember my feeling. They sit on the table and we sit in the middle and try to negotiate. And then on the lunch today, me and Nupur, I don't really know a lot of Indian people, we were just sitting and exchanging notes. I wrote something in Russian for her, she wrote something in Hindi for me. And I remember that feeling as well. And I can tell you that that feeling is much better.
Thank you very much.
Alexandra?
Yaroslav, yeah, you don't want to do firefighting. Very important.
I want you to say Alexandra.
Kayang?
Okay, fine. Since we are running out of time, so I will make it shortly. First, I want to focus on the quality of our education, and what I want to say is in China, the quality of education is somehow is really high. The quality is really high. At least in BRICS countries, maybe our quality is really high. But what the problem is the equality of the education and the resources. We have so many populations, and we have to keep the balance and make a equality for everyone. And maybe this is a really tough question for us now. And maybe I think for use some media methods or internet, use internet. And okay, and the second one, and also the last one for me is about the critical scholarship. Maybe you mean for the international exchanges or cooperation, and I want to say that, in my opinion, it's really necessary for the critical scholarships. It can encourage students go outside and to face students all over the world, and give each class students an opportunity to go out their country and to face the world. And I think it's really necessary.
Absolutely. And the emphasis on
Thank you. Well, thank you for all the questions. I'll try to be straight. I think the most pressing issue would be, how do we really intermingle? How do we connect to each other on a person-to-person level? When we went last afternoon to Alexandra, somehow it wasn't for me that shocking, because I have that kind of social landscape, that reality, human drama, the human exclusion, economic exclusion. The talk in a car went from individuality, ideas, towards economy and the state and politics and all that. It was really a rich, very rich experience. It's necessary to intermingle. We need to have more of this contact. We need to have Chinese, Indian, Russian, South African to go and see also our favelas, and see also the wealthiest avenue in São Paulo, to see how you are pretty much in the middle of the first world country in that avenue, and then you cross the avenue. There is a huge contrast situation. So because of that necessity for us to intermingle in a person-to-person level, I think this is a human engagement. We need to be, we have to be aware of this necessity to engage also emotionally in a quest for learning, in a quest for building knowledge, contributing to knowledge, but it's a knowledge that is socially responsible, that does not neglect the situation we see just across the avenue, across the city, in the other side of the city. Well, and it also somehow relates to the question of regarding the technology, the IT, and how can we think of these technologies, the information technology. The way I see it, for example, in the UK, I see in the elementary school, They're teaching kids how to program by using those, what they call Raspberry, just a small motherboard that emulates a real computer, but it's this small, you can put it in your pocket. It costs like 15 pounds in the UK. It's sold maybe a few million units, and they're teaching children 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, maybe earlier, how to program. The way, there is also sometimes this dichotomy. We think one thing, on the one side we have the human side, the human thing. On the other side we have the machine, the non-human thing in essence. I don't see things that separate. I see things connected. I think this technology is it's a real development of human capacity, human intellect. And it has to be used in the benefit of society, in human causes. So somehow, when we managed to deal with big data, we come up with some relevant qualitative research in social sciences. So furthermore, in this world we're living in the future, as I said, I was, to make my point, I counted on your patience, and I speak a little bit of Chinese. It's a language, right? And computer language, it's also a language. And I need to embrace that passionately. We need to learn. It's available online. It also relates to the Ubuntu, the idea that comes from the open source community. You contribute with knowledge in a horizontal way, in a free of charge. The open source foundations, the open source software, open source mentality. It's all about a collaborative effort, and it's very social. So I think it all connects to this necessity for us to intermingle and to be sensible with the human quest for learning and putting some on each other's shoes, trying to refrain from being selfish, because I make mistake when I'm selfish. You make mistake when you are selfish. We all make mistake, and I think humanity is being very selfish and producing bad outputs.
Thank you very much. Time flies when you have a lot of fun. I can't do justice to what the students say. Let me just single out three things. The idea of the BRICS from above, BRICS from below, that needs to meet in the middle. And I dare say, given the North-South divide, because we're here representing a plurality of countries, all of us, to overcome these divides, but also a very strong emphasis on the cultural dimension, the values dimension. Join me in thanking our students for having a mini student BRICS summit today at Museum.